Welcome to Behind the Thin Blue Line podcast. I'm your host, Jason Somerville, and this is my passion project. Now, being an ex-copper, one of the things you take away with you from the job is the ability to tell a good war story. Generally embellished by the time it gets to 20 plus years after the fact, but still generally a bloody good yarn that you always get asked to tell at parties or barbecues. Sometimes even out drinking. Every copper has a couple of them, and they usually have their preferred go-to that everyone has heard but still love listening to. Now, I've decided to do a best of episode this week of the war stories from the first 6 episodes. Now, if you've been listening, you'll know that there have been 13 parts or mini episodes, and there's been over 8 hours of conversation with current and former police officers. There are definitely some good stories in there. Whilst I usually want to showcase things like the impact of policing has had on people who do it, their struggles and how they've overcome them, and even PTSD. In this episode, I want to focus on the enthusiasm and even joy that each of the people telling the stories has when they tell it. Now, why is this important, I hear you ask? Well, despite all the shit policing takes you through, there are rare glimpses of pure enjoyment and enthusiasm that each person who has done the job has for policing. And that shows when they tell these stories. All right, so first up, we'll go all the way back to episode 1, where I spoke to Tommy, who is a current UC working in a North American police force. For obvious reasons, his conversation wasn't recorded on video, but still the stories he will tell will amaze you. We'll start our look back with him talking about how his wife loves to tell his stories because he hates to. And then we'll listen to the time he bought 8 kilos of meth. Take it away, Tommy.
Your wife must be very understanding.
Yeah, she is totally. I mean, she doesn't ask a lot of questions because she doesn't want the answers. I mean, she likes hearing the cool stories, but and I'll tell her what happened at work, and then she'll relay it. We'll go to people that were close friends, and then she'll tell the story for me because I hate telling it. My daughter, she's 13, and she never knew I was a cop until last year.
Righto.
Yeah, so she for all these years, and then I went back to general patrol, and she's saw me in uniform, and she's like, "Oh, you're a cop?" Like, yeah. What do you think it was? Oh, I thought you were a firefighter. Like,
Fair enough. I was going to say that must have been fun when they had take your father to school days and things like.
Yeah, I was
talking about your father's career.
I was never invited to those.
Because you were the drug dealer.
Yeah.
All right. Look, let's get on to, I guess, some stories about what you've done. I guess similarly, you've had to listen to some of the episodes I've done in relation to this. So some of the things that you've done that you think people listening might be interested in just telling those stories that you obviously hate telling that your wife loves.
Yeah, just kind of a brief of everything. I mean, I've purchased anything from 0.1 of a gram of cocaine, fentanyl, to all the way up to 8 kilos.
How does that work, and how long the 8 kilos talking by? How long does it take to plan that? How long does it take to get to an 8 kilo buy, and how does that work?
Well, I mean, this is not an anomaly for the UC world. Like, this file that I was a part of was part of a homicide. I think it was a double homicide file. Related to a group that eats tacos and likes Corona.
Okay.
That kind of started involved in those, and then they had an operator. They wanted an operator to come in and try and purchase drugs from this group, and that happened to be me. And I kind of started off small, and before I know it, the file just got bigger and bigger, and they utilizing more. And I think I did 10 meets with this person. And on the 10th meet, he was able to sell me 8 kilograms of meth at the time, and I hadn't even shown him money or exchanged money or anything until he got busted, took down, and then.
How does that work? The take then, if you can give, I guess, a little bit of insight into, you see it on the TV where. The undercover is bundled up and taken away and sat in the car and then complaining about the fact that, hey, I haven't done this or I haven't done that or I need to do that. And it's, oh, no, it's all for your safety. We had one undercover buy with me where I was locked up. How does that work at something at that height, at that level, rather, with that size drug?
With that one, it was like our kind of SWAT team. That was kind of like a big file. I mean, they took that him down pretty hard. They took him down when I wasn't there.
Okay.
Just because the fact that he was armed. And there was a big concern for them. A lot of things behind the scenes that I didn't, that I wasn't made aware of.
Think that's a good thing or a bad thing you weren't aware of them?
I always like to know. I always assumed everyone's armed anyway. So I mean, to me, it would have been the same as if I don't know or not known.
Do you carry when you work?
About 95% of the time.
Okay.
Yeah. Just the fact where I'm at and the danger that we kind of face. There's been a few instances where it was very fortunate that I wasn't at the time, but there's been times where I wish I had been.
The question that always comes up when you're a copper, the kids always ask you, or idiots always ask you, have you ever shot someone? I'm not going to ask you if you've ever shot someone, but have you ever been in a situation where having your firearm with you working undercover, you've technically had to use it to make sure that the threat of you using it was seen as real?
There's probably about 3 times where I probably would have used it if I had it.
Can you elaborate on any of those?
Yeah, so the first one was actually weird because when I was doing my undercover training, my first drug buy was I just bought like a dime bag of weed or whatever from this guy. Fast forward about a year later, the same guy I was buying crack from, and
he obviously hadn't been busted in between.
No, it was kind of like a training thing, so he was let go.
Okay.
So fast forward a year, I was buying crack, small amount, like $20, $40 worth of crack.
Yep.
And it was just taking too long for his guy to turn up, and he wanted to chip off my crack as kind of a fee to bring it in his dealer.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where it's just taking too long, and I got the signals going, end it. So I tried to end it, and he was having none of it, and basically went from, no, you rip me off. I've done all this work for you, and then he tried to stab me over $40. Basically gave him the money, gave him a cell phone, and see you later. I'm out of here. And then he was swinging for.
Did he get picked up relatively soon after that?
Yeah, my cover team kind of intervened, kind of not identified himself as police, but kind of intervened so that I could get away. And then 20, 30 minutes later, then General Patrol picked him up and arrested him for robbery, and we got the money and the cell phone back.
So how long were you a police officer before you went into the covert work?
I volunteered for it, and I started it 2 months before I turned 22.
Okay, so 5 years,
No,
nearly in 4 years?
Sworn in at 19, so almost 3. Yeah.
Why did you want to do covert work?
There were people dying in droves of heroin overdoses in the late 70s and early 80s.
Yep.
Right up to the late 80s, I think. But this heroin was being brought in through pretty unprotected borders. So you talk about corruption. A combination of corrupt customs officials, unprotected borders, corrupt police, all through the country. And the heroin trade was out of control. It was really down to a guy called Terence John Clark.
Yep.
Clark with an E, who was a New Zealander, who ran a major international drug syndicate. So the quality of heroin that was coming in from the Golden Triangle was killing people every day.
Yep.
I don't use the term junkies. I use the term addicts. I've seen high functioning addicts in every walk of life. But these young people, predominantly young people, and they were middle class. So heroin use wasn't a lower class drug. It was a middle class drug. We were finding bodies in toilet cubicles, sometimes on the street, etc., in houses, and just horrible.
Yep.
So I was fairly idealistic and naive, and I thought working undercover would be a good way to do something concrete about the drug trade. And essentially, at that age, you think you can change the world, and that's what I tried to do.
Fair enough.
I didn't realise how much it had changed me.
What was the most difficult thing of working undercover for you?
In spite of my upbringing, I was actually a nice guy. I was empathetic. I cared about people. I was polite. If I had to react on the street and take someone down in a violent blitz, absolutely I would. But the core of me, I was just a very nice guy. So one of the hardest things was changing that personality and adopting the personality of a mid-level dealer. And so I portrayed myself as a mid-level heroin dealer. And mid-level heroin dealers don't have the manners and the niceness that I'd had normally. So I had to learn and adapt and adopt the mannerisms of others. I had to speak in a certain way that wasn't the norm for me. I had to treat women like crap. I had to, assert a position even at the age of 22 that I was a shaker and a mover, I suppose, in the drug scene.
Yep.
So all of that stuff. Yeah, one of the hardest things that I ever did was watch a 14-year-old kid be shot up with his first hit of heroin. I thought he was about 17 or 18, but I still couldn't have interfered anyway. And I found out later, about 4 years later, he died of a heroin overdose. And I carried that guilt for quite some time and probably still do.
How do you address that guilt? It's never going to go away, okay? But how did you address that guilt?
Well, when I had my breakdown, I suppose a lot of things had compounded on me. That was one memory that came back, and I've just understood through research and self-awareness and therapy that you can't change what's happened in the past. You just need to, as best you can, accept it, understand it, and move through it. And that sounds simplistic, and it's a lot more detailed than that. But I just look back on it and think, well, what else could I have done? 4 years, when I think about that, I would think about I should have, could have, would have, but it's over and done. It's just been an impact on my life that's one of many trauma.
And I guess, look, partly because I've been there, but the first question that comes to mind is, if you'd intervened then, coulda, woulda, shoulda, does that necessarily mean, one, a week later he wasn't going to take a hit somehow, some other way? Two, what would the outcome have been for you, even though the action was noble, so to speak?
Well, I was in the middle of a heroin operation, and I'd been in this particular region for about 3 months. The operation went for 6. So, and I was working by myself. There was no backup. So, I don't know what it was like in your time, but in my time, you worked one out, and that was it. There were no mobile phones. There were no pages. I didn't wear listening devices very often at all. And I was in a house where no one knew where I was. So, had I intervened, it would have been completely out of character. As I said, I thought he was about 17 or 18.
Yeah.
It would have been completely out of character for a heroin dealer who was buying high-quality heroin in that area.
Yeah.
So it was on the Gold Coast. Would have been completely sus for me to go, hey, what do you think you're doing? Because my assumed identity, I was dealing, I was making a lot of money out of it. So could have resulted in some physical danger to me.
Because of my SWAT background and the extensive training we had, and it sounds mean or it sounds bravado or sounds callous, I guess, but every deal I went into, I had a plan to kill the guy if it went bad.
Okay.
And it's just silly, but and I believe I had the means to do it. And so I didn't worry about that part of it. I worried about, was he going to call my bluff and then, say, hey, you're a cop, and walk out the door, or whatever. And then I'd be a failure at not getting the deal. I really didn't have a whole lot of apprehension of doing the deal. My first undercover deal was, I wasn't there yet, but that was quite a scary deal, to be brutally honest.
What happened? What happened there?
So I had no training. I went to a 2-week basic narcotics school when I was still in the gang unit, because in the gang unit we did so much drug work. But when I got to narcotics, there wasn't any type of undercover school to go to, or I hadn't seen one yet. And I was just, telling all my crewmates, hey, I want to do an undercover deal. And so lo and behold, my longtime partner and friend, Edie, she had an informant, a Mexican guy who didn't speak English, and he wanted to sell guns. I'm like, well, I'll buy guns. So I go do this gun deal with a guy named Jesus. I figured I was safe, the
Yeah.
Hispanic version of
Yeah.
Jesus. I figured I was going to be good
Yep.
to go.
Yep.
He didn't
Except
speak
he did
English.
die on a cross.
Yes, correct. So he didn't speak English. I spoke very little Spanish, and the Spanish I spoke was to tell someone how to get on the ground and put your hands behind your back, which wasn't going to help me in a dope deal.
No.
The informant sat in the back seat of my car, a little two-door Blazer. And anyways, we pull up, and he gets in the car, and this is a tiny little car to where if it was two big guys like me, our shoulders would almost be touching in the front seats. Yep. And as soon as he got in, he's beating sweat. He is nervous as he could possibly be, and he keeps looking out the passenger window like the raid team's coming. And I'm trying to tell him, hey, listen, calm down, tranquilo. And the informant is telling him to calm down, female informant. Yep. And so he hands me the gun, and it's just a shitty gun, but which isn't the crazy part. The crazy part was as soon as he handed me the gun, he put his right hand back in under his coat. He had his hand on his shoulder. He had a shoulder rig. And I've held a gun a million times, and I know what it's like to have a shoulder rig. I know what it's like where the gun is and how you hold it and how it fills your hand. And he had his right hand on a pistol the whole time, and I'm to his left. Well, my left hand is down by my left thigh, which is on my Glock 30. And so here it is, that moment from Good, Bad, and the Ugly with the music playing, who's going to move first? Yep. Well, and he keeps looking out the window like the raid team is coming. And it's like, calm down. Well, the gun was a piece of crap, like I said. And so the informant's like, well, hey, Paul's looking for dope too. He needs a new plug for meth. And he was kind of nervous about that. He sold me a gun. I don't know why he'd be nervous about meth, but with his left hand, he never took his right hand out of his coat. Yep. With his left hand, he gives me, a couple grams of dope. I keep my left hand where it's at, and with my right hand, I take the gun, I take the dope, and I pay him. And it was this weird ballet of he's only using his left hand, I'm only using my right hand. Our other hands were on our guns. And he keeps looking out the window like the raid team's coming. And I'm thinking, if he pulls the gun out, I'm just going to smash him with my right arm and lean into him and then shoot him with my left hand. And it just was one of those, man, it was 10 minutes of tension. I don't know why it even took that long, but it took about 10 minutes. He's trying to get me to try the dope. That one's easy to get out of, and I got out of it. And he believed me. And so no big deal. The deal's finally over. He leaves. And again, so that's not that that crazy, right? But a week later, Edie asked me to buy another. Crazy. Edie asked me to buy another gun from him. And I'm like, hell yeah, I'm in. I love this. I want to buy guns and dope. And she says, well, Paul, I'm not going to let you agree to it until I give you some information. I'm like, okay, what's the scoop? She's like, well, we got some information on Jesus that we didn't know last week. Like, what's that? Well, he killed 2 people in a cartel hit about 3-4 weeks ago. And so we know he's a murderer. We're not sure if homicide is going to be able to pin the case on him. So we want to continue to buy dope and guns off him to give him the best sentence we can get if we can't prove these murders. So I said, okay, that's cool. At least I know who he is now. And I bought dope and guns from him a couple more times, and they were successful.
Do you have a war story? People love war stories, and some people like telling them, some people don't. Do you have a story that you can sort of talk us through, something, a buy that you did that stands out to you that you remember to this day, that you either go, how did I get through that, or why did that happen?
Oh, many of them. Look, there was a job I did in North Queensland, this time with a colleague, and I went up there as the controller. He was undercover for 5 years. He was burnt out, poor bugger. And I was supposed to be the controller. I ended up moving in the same unit and just worked with him as a side-by-side UC. We had a list of targets that we'd worked on, we bought from, so it was, again, a deep operation. But we came across this guy who told us that he told us a certain name, which turned out not to be his name. It's okay, I told him our names and turned out not to be ours. And we got on quite well. And he was an ex-gypsy joker biker, bikie.
Yep.
Didn't know much else about his background, and we were buying a lot of drugs from him. We were setting up a major buy, probably about 200 grand. In those days, in the 80s, was a lot of money.
Yep.
And it was going to take place in Kuranda, north of Cairns in
Yep.
the rainforest. So all organised. And did the job, and a couple of things happened, and I've written about it in the book as well. I was recognised by someone I'd gone to school with when I was with him, and I tap danced my way out of that. But I remember he looked at me with his evil eyes, and I thought, oof, Jesus. Anyway, end of the job happens. The buy didn't go ahead for a couple of reasons. But when he was arrested, he told the investigating detectives that, well, you got me. I'm an escapee from Yatala prison in Adelaide. He'd murdered two guys in the Northern Territory. Cut them up with a knife for a while, then turned them face down and shot them in the back of the head. I think he thought they had a lot of gold with them, and they didn't, because they were prospectors.
Yeah.
Anyway, he'd been sentenced. He gleefully escaped from Yatala, and he'd been on the run for quite some time. And he told them that he'd intended to kill me for the buy money. And the detective told me that, and I went, well, that's disappointing, because I thought we were mates. And we actually got on very well. We used to get out and drink and have an entertaining time together. And the irony is, all the time I was planning to betray him and have him sent to jail, he was planning to betray me and kill me. And we both gave each other false names.
Yeah.
That's one of the most ironic ones I've got.
Yeah, no, I think it's a little bit more than ironic, but it's interesting too that Cairns seems to be the place that most, pardon the paraphrasing here, dead shit end up at the end of the line.
Yeah, north of Cairns, made up in Cape Trib, it's still a good place to hide.
Yep, most definitely.
What's the most dangerous one you've done?
It was only maybe it was about 2020. I got into a car with a fentanyl dealer. First time. It was just a random.
Is fentanyl a big drug?
Yeah, it's really big over here. And I'm sure it's going to be hitting Australia. If it's not already, I'm sure it has. But it's not good. It's a bad one.
Okay, so you're hitting up a fentanyl dealer.
Yeah, so this is one of the times where I'm not armed. Because I was wearing Hawaiian shirt and slippers, and I had nowhere actually.
Oh, Miami Vice style.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So we end up. Yeah, we just. I think it was maybe the third buy of the day of different people, and pretty relaxed, and just jump in, and then I'm in the passenger seat with him. I've got my cover team that's all pretty close, and then started going through the motions. The next minute he pulls out a big Beretta 9mm, sticks into my face. And he was only a young guy. I mean, I think I'm quite large, so I think I kind of intimidated him. And he wanted to be the alpha male, and that was his way of showing me that he was the top dog.
What do you do in that situation? Because you're obviously aware of why he's doing it. Most drug dealers would be, oh, okay, I've got to show myself now and assert my dominance because I'm the drug dealer type thing. How do you deal with that? Because part of you will be, shit, what's going to happen? The other part will be, do I have to assert myself, and where is that going to get me?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You're going to that's where it comes to training and stuff you've learned beforehand. Like I've done a lot of courses where kind of undercover operator, like kind of fix fighting in vehicles, shooting from in vehicles, shooting with outside of vehicles, knowing where the door handle is, how to get out quick, where to put your feet so you can fight, like not putting the seatbelt on, make sure the door's unlocked or not fully shut. There's like a bunch of things that you just do automatically. And I think when he did that, I didn't, trying to run out or anything like that. Kind of just when I took my way through it, and I was like, man, hey, cool gun. Where you bringing that, gun to a drug deal, kind of, and kind of took my way out of it a little bit.
Was part of that so your team knew that was happening as well?
Exactly. Like I wanted to make sure they're aware, and then in the background they're doing their things to, ready to intervene if it went that way. Because at the end of the day, if I had a turn and try to run out, he could have shot in the back just as easy.
Yep.
I mean, reaction would have been not even close to him being able to shoot me.
So you've tried to talk him down, and obviously you have, because you were here talking to me. Did you have to become the alpha, or was it like, oh no, I'm going to let you be the alpha dog?
I was going to let him. Yeah, man, you're in charge. This is your show. I'm just here to buy a bit of dope, and then I kind of just, kind of let my team know, hey, there's a gun in play. Kind of communicate to them that, and then try to calm him down, let him know that he's in charge, he's the cool guy. I'm just the drug addict that's buying $100 worth of fentanyl from him, and I kind of made it like, yeah, man, cool gun. Anyway, here's my $100. Kind of like do that, settle him down a little bit, let him know that I'm just here to buy a bit of fentanyl.
And did he settle down? What was his reaction?
And he's like, oh, yeah, cool. And he puts the gun between his legs and then pieces out my dope. And then
did he put the gun with the butt facing towards him, or with the barrel facing towards him?
No, the barrel towards the seat. So I mean,
right. Yep. So someone who obviously doesn't want to have too many kids in the future if it was accidentally going off. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully not. Hopefully he doesn't.
Yeah. Fair enough. How long did that buy take all up?
It was enough for me. I smoked 2 cigarettes during it.
Okay, without knowing how quickly there was that 10 minutes?
Oh, yeah, so I was pulling them pretty quick. But I actually, at the end of it, I think my cover team was more stressed about it than I was. But
how do you debrief from that with your team?
It was one of those things where, like, I could tell they were like rattled. They were pretty upset about it all, I think. But I was like, joking and being my usual self. And they're like, I could tell they weren't very happy.
A lot of what I was just telling you got to tell mostly the truth, and you have to have 3 steps ahead of them in your planning when they ask you something, and you have to sell it. And I don't mean selling the fact that you've got this long backdrop story of something that's phony, but mostly what's true. I had a truck that I drove that looked like it was a construction truck, right? Pouring concrete kind of truck. That was my undercover vehicle for a long time. And I didn't just use the truck. I had all the equipment in the truck. And I would have bid sheets on my dashboard. And I had a guy come up to my window once who my informant was going to introduce me to. And I found out later that he was a former informant for a different agency. And his name was Phil. It's like, hey, what do you do, Paul? I said, I'm in concrete work. He's like, bullshit, you don't do concrete. And so because I had pre-planned, Jason, up on my dash or above my visor, I pulled down a bid sheet and I handed it to him. And I wrote that bid sheet that day, had the date on it and the address. And it was my old address. So I know the address and I could describe the driveway I was going to pour and all the dimensions. And I know a little bit about concrete. So I had had the numbers on there, the measurements and the cost and the labor hours. And I handed him the bid sheet and said, F you. And he looks at it for about a minute. He's like, oh, I guess you do concrete. And I'm like, yeah, now get out of my face, punk. And I ended up buying dope from him a couple of days later because he believed my story. And I think that's where some guys fall short, is that, and that was me. The first couple of times somebody asked me what I did, I'm a welder. And I'm not. I don't know shit about welding. And I could tell there's times where they wouldn't believe me. And so, like, I can't use that story anymore because I'm not a welder, but I know concrete and I know some construction. So I let them know that they have to kind of be backstopped themselves since our department doesn't do it. Have some props to come with you, have some things they can see. I used to put pictures of me and my buddies who aren't cops on the sun visor of my car, or especially if they were friends of mine that had passed away.
Yep.
Because there's a picture of this guy and there's a picture of someone else. They're wearing construction outfits. It just sold it. That this is what I do. and that's when I got better. Originally
It's
I
the
looked
little
like this,
details.
yeah, I looked like this big burly biker. I used to wear my Harley Davidson shirts cut
Yeah.
off, and the goatee was down to my belly button, and I acted like a biker, and I'm not a biker. And a lot of the deals that I had that failed, my boss would say later, is like, I think you scared the crap out of that dude. You look too mean. He thinks you're gonna beat him up or you're gonna rip him off. And when I finally went to that undercover school, the guy's like, yeah, you look too mean, dude. You're scaring people. Change your look. You need to smile more. And so I went from the biker look to like a construction worker look.
Yep.
And instead of being the tough guy, I was just a dude. That was it.
Okay.
And that's what I pass on to these guys is you got to just be the dude. You got to be an everyday nobody.
11 years after I resigned, I had a major, probably a breakdown, or very close to it, major anxiety attack, quite crippling. And I started seeing a counsellor. I had no idea about counselling. And it was 2006. So, I went through a stage of seeing counsellors, trying to find the right one, knowing full well that I had issues, not understanding what they were, all of that. So, off and on for the next probably 10 years or so, in and out of counselling offices, no regularity, trying to probably fix myself, I guess, through, exercise and as much research as I could. Not having a great deal of success because I still, drank way too much. I was angry. I was withdrawn. I was all of the classic symptoms of PTSD. I started writing a couple of chapters to give to my daughters because they were then older. But they'd grown up with me in that whole world of post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's a disorder for a reason. It's named a disorder for a reason. If it affects your life longer than 4 to 6 weeks, it's a disorder. So I wanted to write something to them when I was getting better. I have to clarify, I was never physically violent. I was never mentally abusive. I was just withdrawn. I was just, had anger about little things that would flash to the surface.
I think that's the thing with PTSD, that most people will see it as outbursts of anger that become violent, whereas for a vast majority of people that suffer with it, it's small things like snapping at the dog or that sort of thing, which yes is a violent reaction, but it's seen as, in society, it's probably seen as okay, well, that's just an everyday reaction, and that's what it's put down to. Things have just gotten too much on that particular day, if that makes sense. And there's no understanding across that a number of these little things add up to maybe something like PTSD.
Yeah, look, and again, book number 2, mate, I've written about how someone told me I might have PTSD and I didn't believe him because I thought that was only for people who'd done really dangerous stuff. And in hindsight, I'd been in gun battles, I'd lost a mate, all of that stuff, which is really dangerous stuff.
Yeah.
So I started writing. I wanted to give the girls something to help them understand why I had been like I had been for so long.
Yep.
So